They thought they were about to win the war. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the Empire of Japan had done everything right. Every operation had worked, every advance had succeeded, and across the Pacific, their forces moved with a level of precision and confidence that had been built not on hope, but on results. They had struck first, struck hard, and struck effectively, taking control of vast stretches of territory while their opponents struggled to respond. To them, the outcome was no longer uncertain. It was inevitable. The United States was still fighting, yes, but it was reacting, not dictating. And in war, that difference matters, because the side that reacts is already losing. Japan understood this deeply, and that's exactly why they didn't want a long war. They didn't want to slowly grind the United States down over years. They wanted to end it decisively, in a single moment that would break the American ability and will to continue the fight. The idea they built was bold, calculated, and dangerously dependent on everything working exactly as planned. The objective wasn't just another victory, it was the complete collapse of American naval power in the Pacific. The logic was simple. The United States depended on its aircraft carriers to project power across the ocean. Without them, there would be no way to strike back, no way to defend distant positions, no way to continue the war at scale. Destroy the carriers, and you don't just win a battle, you end the war. But there was a problem. The American carriers weren't where they were supposed to be. They had survived Pearl Harbor, they had moved, and now they were somewhere in the vastness of the Pacific, unseen. So the question became something much more difficult. How do you force an enemy to reveal itself when it doesn't want to be found? The answer was simple, but risky. You attack something it cannot afford to lose.
That target was Midway, a small, isolated outpost in the middle of the Pacific that on its own seemed insignificant, just 2 tiny islands surrounded by thousands of miles of open ocean. But strategically, it meant everything. It was a forward base, a defensive anchor, a position that extended American reach deeper into the Pacific. If Midway fell, the entire defensive line would weaken. And more importantly, if Midway was attacked, the Americans would have no choice but to respond. They would send their carriers, they would fight, and when they did, Japan would be waiting, ready to destroy them in one decisive blow. It was a trap, layered, precise, and built on timing, and from the outside, it looked perfect. But there was something Japan couldn't see, something that didn't move with fleets or appear in reconnaissance reports. Inside a quiet, windowless room at Pearl Harbor, American codebreakers had been working relentlessly, not with weapons or ships, but with fragments of information, signals, patterns, pieces of communication that individually meant nothing, but together told a story that wasn't supposed to be understood. Slowly, piece by piece, they began to reconstruct Japan's plan. They didn't just suspect an attack, they were beginning to understand its timing, its scale, and most importantly, its target. But understanding wasn't enough. They needed confirmation, because if they were wrong, they would be committing their entire fleet based on a guess. So they created a test. A simple message was sent, deliberately exposed. Midway was running low on fresh water. It sounded insignificant, almost meaningless. But when a Japanese transmission soon confirmed AF is short on water, everything changed. AF was Midway. In that moment, the Americans didn't just suspect the attack, they knew it.
From that point on, the United States stopped reacting and started shaping the battle. Admiral Chester Nimitz made a decision that would define everything that followed. Instead of waiting defensively, he positioned his limited carrier forces northeast of Midway, carefully placing them just outside Japanese detection, hidden, silent, waiting. While Japan moved forward believing it was setting a trap, the Americans were already inside it, preparing to close it at exactly the right moment. It was no longer a question of whether the battle would happen, it was a question of timing, who would strike first and under what conditions. On the morning of June 4, 1942, the operation began exactly as Japan had planned.
Aircraft launched in coordinated waves, moving with discipline and experience toward Midway. Bombers struck the island with precision. Runways were hit, hangars destroyed, fuel depots ignited, and smoke rose into the sky. From above, it looked like success. Everything appeared to be unfolding according to plan. But something wasn't right. Midway was still operational. American aircraft were still taking off. The base had been damaged, but not neutralized. And that meant the job wasn't finished. That meant time was being lost. And in a plan that depended entirely on timing, even small delays carried consequences.
Then came something unexpected. American aircraft began appearing over the Japanese fleet, not in coordinated formations, not in carefully structured waves, but in scattered, desperate attacks. Torpedo bombers flew low and slow, easy targets for experienced Japanese fighters. Dive bombers arrived without proper support. One by one, these attacks failed. Planes were shot down before they could reach their targets. Pilots pressed forward anyway, fully aware of the odds against them, fully aware they would not survive. Entire squadrons were wiped out with no visible impact. From the Japanese perspective, it looked like complete control. Every incoming threat was being eliminated. Every engagement ended in their favor. It felt like victory was already happening. But those attacks were not meaningless. They were doing something far more important than causing damage. They were buying time. Each wave forced Japanese fighters to descend, engage, refuel, and reposition. Each attack disrupted operations, delayed decisions, and kept the fleet in a constant state of reaction. And below deck, something dangerous was building. Aircraft were being rearmed. Torpedoes were replaced with bombs, then bombs replaced again as new information came in. Fuel lines stretched across hangars. Ordnance was stacked in unsafe positions. Crews rushed, waiting for orders that kept changing. Above them, commanders struggled with incomplete information, forced to decide whether to strike Midway again or prepare for an American fleet that was not supposed to be there. Every decision cost time, and time was slipping away.
Then, without warning, everything shifted. High above the battlefield, unseen and undetected, a group of American dive bombers was searching. They had already missed their target once. Fuel was running low. The safe choice was to turn back. And for a moment, that almost happened. But one decision changed everything. Instead of turning back, they continued, just a little longer, just enough to find what no one expected them to find. Below them, the Japanese carriers were completely exposed. Fighters were out of position. Decks were crowded. Aircraft were fully fueled, fully armed, waiting. It was the worst possible moment. And in less than 5 minutes, everything collapsed. Bombs fell with devastating precision, striking exactly where they needed to. Explosions tore through hangars filled with fuel and ammunition. Fire spread instantly, triggering chain reactions that could not be contained. One carrier was hit, then another, then another. What had been the most powerful naval strike force in the world was suddenly engulfed in flames. Command centers were destroyed, crews were trapped. Ships that had dominated the Pacific just hours earlier were now turning into burning wrecks. It happened so fast that there was no time to respond.
For a brief moment, one carrier remained, the Hiryu, and for a moment it looked like Japan might still recover. It launched a counterattack, striking the USS Yorktown and causing significant damage, proving that the battle was not entirely decided. But the balance had already shifted. American forces regrouped, located the Hiryu, and destroyed it. With that, the outcome was sealed.
Japan lost 4 aircraft carriers, hundreds of aircraft, and thousands of highly trained personnel, pilots and crews who could not be replaced quickly, if at all. The core of its naval air power was gone. The United States, despite its own losses, gained something far more important than a tactical victory. It gained momentum. From that moment forward, Japan would no longer advance across the Pacific. It would defend.
and the United States would begin pushing forward, step by step, changing the direction of the war.
The Battle of Midway was not just a victory, it was a turning point. A battle Japan believed it would win, a plan that should have worked, a moment where everything was under control, until it wasn't. Because in war, you don't always lose because your plan was flawed. Sometimes you lose because your enemy understood it better than you did. And in Midway, that understanding lasted only a few minutes, but it was enough to change the course of history.